Denver Broncos quarterback Bo Nix got his opportunity to run with the first-team offense on day 2 of Broncos training camp. What did we see from Jarrett Stidham, and Zach Wilson? We'll break all that down here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos credentialed reporter for Mile High Sports. Cover the team in person daily at practice. Joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, longtime site expert over there for Broncos Country at predominantlyorange.com. And on today's episode of the show, we're going to dive deep into who stood out during day 2 of Broncos camp, including Audric Estime looking good early on. Courtland Sutton, his contract situation finally got resolved, and Bo Nix getting the opportunity to run with the ones. You get all that here on today's episode of the show. Real quick, I want to say thanks to all the everydayers out there for making us your first listen of the day. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube, so subscribe so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team here. I mean, Sayre, really opening things up here on today's show. We are really on the cusp now. Broncos Country will be able to attend Friday's practice, and they'll be able to see a lot of the competition between the quarterbacks. During Thursday's practice, Bo Nix got his first opportunity of training camp to run with the first-team offense for the Broncos overall on the afternoon. 2 team periods, 1 7-on-7 period. Not necessarily what we're going to see during training camp, but a little bit more than what we saw on day 1 of the acclimation period. Bo got a chance to run with the ones. And look, I still think at this point, Sayre, this quarterback battle between these guys, what we saw from Bo Nix, what we saw from Jarrett Stidham, Zach Wilson, I still don't think in the acclimation portion of training camp, I still don't think it's enough to draw any definitive conclusions just yet.
Yeah, and at the same time, too, it's really not about the day-to-day comparison. As Sean Payton said, like, he doesn't like doing that. He doesn't want us to do it. I heard a reporter ask a question about who stood out today, and he's like, I don't really want to talk about who's winning the day each day, right? I mean, and I think that applies directly to the quarterback position as well, where it's right now, like, the quarterback competition. I don't want to say fabricated. I don't want to say contrived. I think we're going from point A to point B. Point B is Bo Nix being the starter eventually, whether that's week 1 or week 3, week 4. I don't know when it's going to be, but that's got to be the ultimate goal. And so what is this competition, quote unquote, what does that mean? What does that look like? How are the Broncos going to balance all these reps? Because when fans go out there, based on the order that we know of right now, the fans are going to see Zach Wilson with the number 1 offense, at least in terms of what we assume is going to happen. And it could be different. They could change it up and things like that, but that seems to be the order we're going.
Sean Payton said he'll let us know.
He'll let us know. Yeah. You'll know when you see it out there. So, but wouldn't that be funny is if all this talk of the competition being really between Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix, and then the fans go out there, the first opportunity they get, and it's Zach Wilson. I mean, it's just funny how things work out that way, if it does work out. But look, Bo Nix getting the opportunity to run with the ones. I'm interested to know, Cody, because I'm not able to be out at practice yet, although that does seem to be potentially in the cards here for the first week of August. Hopefully going to be making it out there. But let us know what you saw, because I've heard mixed things about Bo Nix looking like a rookie. I've heard that he played pretty well. I've heard Jarrett Stidham still looks better. I've heard Zach Wilson, frankly, has looked maybe better than the other 2 guys at times throughout these first 2 days. So you tell us, what have you seen from Bo? What did he show on this second acclimation practice?
All right, so I got my handy dandy notebook here for Broncos Country. I literally detail chart every play that happens. We'll start off with 7-on-7. Nix completed all 4 of his passing attempts during 7-on-7. He found Javonte Williams on one play, Lucas Kroll on a deep kind of play to the outside there, about 14, 15 yards. He connected with Jaleel McLaughlin and then Tyler Beatty out of the backfield as well. You get to Zach Wilson, who got the second reps of the day in terms of quarterbacks. Really for him, he had a nice throw to Lil Jordan Humphrey for about 15 yards. He had a pass to Courtland Sutton for about 4 to 6, and a little dump off check down to Jaleel McLaughlin to really end. I mean, quarterbacks were good overall in 7-on-7, but it's like if we're watching the competition from a 7-on-7 standpoint, that's going to be skewed a little bit because it's always going to be a passing emphasis. You know, you don't have your linebackers taking their run read, their run steps just to be able to do that. It's very offensively, favored in terms of timing and getting reps. Let's go to team, where this is probably the most important area. Now, I would say overall on team period, it wasn't the best day really for the Broncos offense in general. I mean, DJ Jones, first play, had a blow up on the outside against Javonte Williams. But when we talk about the passing game, got to see Bo Nix try to dial up a long shot to Troy Franklin, who was covered by Patrick Surtain. Franklin got a little bit of a step on PS2, but Nix overthrew it a little bit. And so, I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, he overthrew it. And then the freak out happens. It was just a yard or so in front of Troy Franklin there. It happens. And then he had another play, an incomplete pass to Josh Reynolds. He kind of rolled out. Faced the pressure. I would say the first team offense, second team offense, third team offense, they face pressure from the defensive line, which is something we'll dive deep into here later for the show. But Zach Wilson, I mean, we could even talk about this. Like, he had 2 plays on the first team period that he got in where he got sacked or would have been sacked in a game. Like, that trend has continued, unfortunately. Jarrett Stidham, I mean, he scrambled and had a good scramble drill throw to Devon Vele. Aside from that, Audric Estime had a nice run. We'll dive deeper to him. He had a dump off to Javonte Williams for about a 5-yard gain. And then the second and final team period, Nix had a high pass across the middle that fell incomplete. Like, it was tipped onto the fingertips of the receiver, fell incomplete there. He had a pass to Josh Reynolds that was well placed, but Levi Wallace came in, had a great pass breakup there. He had a dump off pass to Tyler Beatty, but then he probably had the nicest looking play of the day from a quarterback. He dropped back, pressure came from one side. He spun out of pressure, evaded it, and threw a rope to Tim Patrick on the scramble drill on a deep comeback. It was a nice play to be able to see there from Nix. Like, how do you maneuver when things break down around you? It was a great evaluation, but can we really get anything from this quarterback competition and this such small sample size without pads? I don't think we can read too much into it, either good or bad, for any of these quarterbacks until the pads really come on.
Right. And especially, I think it'll help once Sean Payton does name a starter and you're able to see the guy out there with that top offense consistently, as opposed to every third day. I mean, there's so many factors that go into this that it's way too easy to read into, oh, he overthrew Troy Franklin at practice, or, a ball went off the hands and got intercepted at one point from another quarterback and things like that. I mean, you can see if guys are passing the eye test and if they're doing the right things out there a lot of times. I mean, you want to see the big plays downfield. You want to see him connect on those. But if we were talking about, him connecting with Troy Franklin on a deep ball, then somebody's going to be like, well, Pat Surtain, what's wrong with Pat Surtain? I mean, there's no winning at training camp, although,
it's
you get
competitive.
excited about it. It's competitive. And look, I guess if you want to question his arm strength, if you overthrow Troy Franklin, I think that shows you got a pretty strong arm right there. So, I mean, that's what I'm taking from that, Cody. But I think ultimately it's going to have to be a wait and see until these guys are getting more consistent reps with that first team offense. And until then, we may have to wait for the first preseason game to really see kind of that extended time on task in game situations to be able to make some real determinations.
Ideally, this Broncos quarterback competition isn't going to be won or lost in the first week of training camp. There's a large body of work and a large sample size that Sean Payton, Davis Webb, and the Broncos Brain Trust want to have before they make an informed decision on who's going to be the starter here in 2024. But Bo, obviously running with the first team offense during day 2 of Broncos camp. We don't know what the rotational order is going to look like just yet for day 3 or the first day when Broncos Country can attend at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. But one thing we do know, Courtland Sutton, he's not going anywhere for a little bit. He is a happy man after receiving a little bit of a restructure to his contract. We'll dive deep into his contract situation finally being resolved here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up for peak performance. Whether it's for your car or your truck, they have superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Anything that you're looking for, eBay Motors, they've got. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, they've got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for every time. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Once again, it's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
The contract situation for Broncos wide receiver Courtland Sutton is resolved. And you know what? A little bit of an underwhelming resolution here. We're going to discuss that and break down exactly the details of what got Courtland Sutton back under contract in a brand new way here as Broncos training camp officially kicks off with fans able to attend practice on Friday. Cody and I are going to break down the Courtland Sutton contract details on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, free and available everywhere that you get your podcasts, as well as, you know what, you should go over to YouTube if you haven't already. Hit subscribe on YouTube, where we just passed 13,000 subscribers. We're on the road now to 14 and 15. That's the next milestone. So go ahead and do that if you haven't already, Broncos Country. Let's talk about this Courtland Sutton contract adjustment. To me, based on what we've been talking about, Cody, based on the reports that have been out there, the decision by the Broncos and Courtland Sutton to add $1.5 million in incentives, which was reported initially by Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, there's only $1.5 million of added incentives to this contract now, which brings his base salary or his overall number up this year to $15.2 million. To me, is this worth holding out at OTAs? Is this, an incentive? He's not getting added guarantees. This is very interesting to me. It feels like a very anticlimactic ending to this saga between Sutton and the Broncos. What's your read on this news? Ultimately, all is well that ends well. Courtland is in the building. He's obviously happy with what they came to an agreement with, which matters more than anything, but feels like this is kind of a weird resolution.
Well, I feel like it's maybe kind of like this middle ground olive branch, so to speak. Obviously, I know that the initial holdout or not showing up for the team's offseason program, at least in the voluntary portion, was more so over guaranteed money. Like, you look at the wide receiver market, Sayre, it has changed significantly with what Justin Jefferson just commanded, $35 million per year. Obviously, well-deserved for him. And then now CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys is holding out, and probably is going to get around 33, maybe 34 million per year. Courtland isn't asking for that type of money, nor has he ever asked for that type of money. But Courtland, coming off of a 10-touchdown season, that's productive, right? Touchdowns help you win games. And unfortunately, for the Broncos, they haven't had a lot of success offensively over the last handful of years, but a bright spot really has been, when healthy, has been Courtland Sutton. And so part of me is thinking these $1.5 million in incentives here for Sutton have something along the lines to do with, okay, hey, I did this last year. I know I can produce this year. So if he hits certain milestones, and this is what we don't know yet in terms of the contract details on what the incentives are, but he can earn $1.5 million this upcoming season in incentives if he does maybe have a certain amount of yards, a certain amount of catches, a certain amount of touchdowns, maybe a Pro Bowl recognition, like maybe stuff that wasn't in his previous contract and when he got the initial extension back in 2021, courtesy of George Payton. But like, this is just like a middle ground. Hey, like, we have faith in you. We believe in you. And it goes back to the last day of OTAs, mandatory minicamp, when Sean Payton said that he and Sutton, they had a campfire conversation. Now, they didn't actually sit in front of the campfire and make s'mores and talk about this, but they had a meeting in his office, and they talked about, Courtland wanted to know, like, for me, like, am I still a big part of this offense? Obviously Denver went out in the draft. They got Troy Franklin. They got Devon Vele. They got Josh Reynolds in free agency. They traded away Jerry Jeudy. Marvin Mims going to have a bigger role. Like, Courtland, I think, wanted to know, like, I just had 10 touchdowns this past season. I had my best year since 2019. I stayed healthy. I want to be here. I want to help win, but I also want to be compensated fairly based on what the market value. I think Christian Kirk's probably a great example. What is it? Darnell Mooney, I think, is another example in terms of where the market was at. I think 12, 13 million a year. Mm-hmm. Courtland, I think if he goes out this season, Sayre, has six or even 7 touchdowns, more than that, he's going to command a new extension. I think that Denver's going to find a way to give it to him, but I think it's more of a, hey, considering, he had the injury in 2020, you didn't have the greatest year coming back from that. You had a 10 touchdown season last year. We know what you can do. Now go out and do it again. But also, if you do that, we are going to pay you for that versus the non-guaranteed money you don't have on your contract this upcoming season.
And the tough part for Courtland is the fact that when he will hit free agency is in 2026, and he'll be 30 years old at that time. So that's not to say, ancient by any means, because 30 is, I mean, these guys can stay in great shape, and Courtland we know does. And it's just, that's the optics of it, right? Is when you hit 30, I mean, the price changes, and that's just the reality of the situation. And Courtland's average annual value on his deal at $15 million, he's below guys like Jerry Jeudy and Christian Kirk and other players. And that's the tough part about, I mean, you talk about when we first heard about that deal, Cody, he signed it back in 2021 during the season.
Right after that Raiders game, the immediate response from a lot of fans is, wow, that's an overpay. And then you and I sit here and we say, actually, a couple years down the line, that's going to look like a huge bargain. That's the tension right now, isn't it? Is that, okay, back then it felt like a bit of at least market value, if not an overpay to some people, which people did comment that. People did say that on my Twitter. They said that the Broncos overpaid Courtland Sutton. And then now it's like he's upset because he kind of feels like, man, the market has risen. I'm not going to hit free agency till I'm 30 years old. My best shot at getting more money is to say I want it. And so I get where he's coming from completely. And that's where fans got to understand, like, it has nothing to do with Courtland not wanting to be in Denver. It has everything to do with the business side of football. That is, like, once he hits the age of 30, his price is going to reach a cap. His ability to make money in free agency will reach a cap. That's just the reality of the situation. So yeah, I think all is well that ends well. Like we said earlier, Courtland is back in and happy, and I don't think there was any question of him coming back. But now this distraction is kind of off the table until, like you said, next offseason when kind of revisit those extension talks, perhaps. Yeah, and look, I think it's going to play out that way. I do think Courtland will land an extension, whether it's later this year, whether it's next season at some point. I do think he finishes his career in Denver, barring anything unforeseen. Like, Courtland is a big, sizable guy, and I think it would be naive of us to ignore what Sean Payton said following day 2 of Broncos camp, talking about size and having big guys at the wide receiver position. Sure, there's other guys around the NFL that have big size, but none of them are as big as Courtland or Tim. Like, Denver's got good size in that wide receiver room, and Sean says that's the prototype for today's NFL, and it's not a shot against the smaller receivers. Those guys have different skill sets from what Sean had said, but size is what is going to help you win in today's NFL. Courtland certainly can do that, and we know if fully healthy, and obviously if you have a good offensive structure around him, I think if you have better quarterback play, I think it only amplifies what he can do, what Tim Patrick can do, and what other guys on this roster can do as well. And I think that's something that Broncos fans should absolutely look forward to. But I mean, when you talk about it as well, it's like the timeline of him, you're going to hit 30 years of age, like NFL players, like the depreciation in terms of their contract value, it goes down significantly once 30, 31 years of age come around. And it's unfair because we see a lot of guys that play really well, even in their 30s, even late 30s. To me, it's just the unfortunate, as you mentioned, the business side of this game. It's nasty. It's brutal. It's often one-sided. And I think now I'm a little bit more glad that players have more leverage now than they did in years past, because they're changing it for a lot of these young guys that are going to be coming into the league in the next 3 to 4 years. They're going to be in a better system in terms of, okay, hey, like, what do we have to make sure that we're taking care of after football? And I think that these guys are kind of setting the paving the way a little bit for it. So obviously glad that this is now resolved. And look, hopefully Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick, hopefully these guys catch a lot of touchdowns in 2024. But day 2 of Broncos training camp, the second acclimation practice wrapped up in Dove Valley. What were some of the standouts from the practice? Obviously a short ramp-up period, no pads just yet. One running back looked impressive. We'll highlight him and more as the Broncos get ready for an intense competition in the backfield here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. LinkedIn Jobs is the sponsor of today's episode of Locked On Broncos. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role and right for the job. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs, they have the tools that help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively seeking a new job or even looking for a new job, but they might be open to the perfect opportunity if it arises. On any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that small businesses, they're wearing so many hats and they may not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is consistently finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a brand new feature that helps you write job descriptions, which makes the process even quicker and easier. Over 2.5 million businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon NFL. That's linkedin.com/lockedon NFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Broncos rookie running back Audric Estime looks strong in Thursday's second acclimation practice, one practice before Broncos Country can attend at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. Could the Broncos' new rookie running back have a little bit of a big impact this season in the run game and maybe even in the passing game for the Broncos? We'll dive deeper to that here on today's episode show. Recap the other key observations from day 2 of Broncos camp here. Real quick, I want to say thanks once again, Broncos Country, for making us your first listen. If you're an everydayer, we appreciate you. And if you're not an everyday listener right now, you need to change that because the game is changing and we have you covered every single day on all things that you need to know surrounding the Denver Broncos. So with that said, Sayre, let's start things off by talking about Audric Estime, who, when I watched practice on Thursday, I came away with the impression I was very impressed with him in terms of him coming off of having off-season knee surgery, really a scope. But people are like, oh, it's just a scope. You still go into the knee. There's still some scar tissue that builds up because you get cut open into, even if it's arthroscopic at that point. But man, he's got explosive bursts in between the tackles. He had 2 runs in the team period. I'm going through my notes right here as I look through what had happened here. Initially, I think his first run, it came in the second team period. I mean, the first team period with the third team offense with Jarrett Stidham running the show. He had a great run inside where he really got skinny in between the guard and the center. And then he got toward the sideline and had a little bit of burst through the hole where nobody touched him. And look, he's a bowling ball. Love to see that. And one thing that Sean Payton touched on in the press conference following Thursday's practice was his ball carrier vision is something that they obviously were very high on coming out of the NFL draft in Notre Dame. He's had 2, I think, good days in a row here. When the pads come on Monday, that I think is what we're going to be looking forward to as well.
Yeah, I don't know how much skinnier he's going to be able to get going by the guard in the center when he's got the shoulder pads on, Cody. The guy looks like he's got to turn sideways to walk through an automatic door that opens up, to get into buildings and things like that. I feel like he's just a tank out there. We've talked about this. I'm very high and excited on Audric Estime. Sounds like Sean Payton has been for quite some time as well. He came just short at his press conference of saying, like, I banged the table for this guy during the NFL draft because of what he brings to the table. And look, there's aspects of his game that are undeveloped or underdeveloped at this point compared to, let's say, Samaje Perine, who's outstanding in the pass catching department. And Sean Payton noted that, you throw it underneath to Samaje on 3rd and 8, he's going to get you 8.5 yards and he's going to get past that line to gain. That's just Audric Estime's got to learn how to do that on a consistent basis. You just didn't see a ton of it at Notre Dame, but what he does well is exceptional. The contact balance, the ability to create yardage after contact, like you mentioned, the vision, the ability to get skinny when needed, the deceptive explosiveness for a guy of his size. He really reminds me of some of those Broncos running backs of old that, back when I was in high school, they could crank out 1,000-yard back like that. I mean, it was like Mike Shanahan just waved his magic wand and there was 1,000-yard back. And then Gary Kubiak comes in and he's like, hey, give me that wand. And he waves the wand. There's another 1,000-yard back. And you had 2 on the same team, Mike Anderson, Tatum Bell, basically. So I think that's what this guy reminds me of. Not that he's just a one cut and go runner, but he's built so well, and he's got that deceptive burst and explosiveness that's going to allow him to get outside the tackle, to play with inside the tackle, and really create those yards after contact, to become more proficient as a receiver. I don't want to keep hyping him up like we got a first round back in the building, but look, you don't need to draft backs in the first round to get that kind of production. So I'm really high on Audric Estime, and I think the fans should be as well.
No, and he's certainly a player to watch when Broncos fans attend practice. He is number 37. For those of you that do not know, that do plan on going out there and attending over the course of the next handful of weeks here. And obviously, we'll have you covered every single day with an episode of Locked On Broncos. Some other observations that we'll talk about as well. I know that a lot of people are interested in the cornerback rotation in terms of, okay, hey, cornerback 2, what we saw on day 2 of practice, it was Damari Mathis getting the first look opposite of Patrick Surtain for the second day in a row here for the Broncos. And then Levi Wallace rotated in with him on the third play at that point. And then what you saw was Riley Moss would come in on that same series when Pat Surtain would come out. But you're seeing just, I don't think there's anything that we can read into with this right now, right? I think everyone's going to be looking at, okay, well, who gets the first reps? I mean, certainly that's going to factor into it, but they have so many cornerbacks right now. They're trying to rotate their top heavy guys in with the first team unit and also the second team unit, just so they can see more looks as to who they think can play in the nickel, who they think can play on the outside. And look, Jaquan McMillan's also factored into that conversation as well. So nothing I think that we should read too deep into just yet. I think I'll be very curious after the second preseason game, what the rotation, like who starts at cornerback opposite of PS2. I think that's going to be something we'll monitor when preseason comes around. We're just a couple of weeks away from that, by the way. And then I would say the defensive line. Now, granted, the pads, Sayre, have not been thrown on just yet. Monday is the day for that, for Broncos fans planning to attend that practice. But the defensive line in the first 2 days of this acclimation period the Broncos have conducted, they are physical, they are chippy, they have personality, they're fun to watch, and they are getting in the backfield consistently. Day 1, it was Zach Allen doing that. Day 2, DJ Jones was disrupting everything. I mentioned it on the very first team play of the day. There was a run to Javonte Williams, got blown up in the backfield, and it was DJ who created backfield penetration. And I think John Franklin Myers is obviously contributing into that. Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper. I mean, there are a lot of different things going on here, but so far, early returns without really too much to invest in it because of the pads and lack thereof. Just a nice start for the Broncos defensive line in terms of the intensity and the energy in terms of getting stops. That was nice to see.
That certainly gets you excited to see what these guys will look like with the pads on. I mean, that this is an area of the team that needed to be upgraded. We've talked about that ad nauseum on the show. The defensive line was atrocious last year. The upgrades in personnel this year are undeniable. And I think that the attitude is obviously different from these guys. They're going to make each other better. The interior linemen are going to make the edge guys better and vice versa. I just feel like it's shaping up to be a huge area of progression on this team. Sticking on the defensive side of the ball, Cody, I mean, JL Skinner, you mentioned him as well as somebody that kind of stood out a little bit. I think that's going to be very welcomed news for Denver Broncos fans who have been really excited about this guy who could have been as high as maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick in last year's draft, fell to the 6th due to injury. What did you see from JL Skinner out there at the second day of acclimation practice?
Yeah, he had a nice pass breakup in coverage, underneath against Greg Dulcich. He was going toward the sideline. He did a great job getting into Greg's hip positioning and then bringing his ball side hand forward, knocking the pass up into the air, forcing it to go incomplete. And he's had a great offseason. I'll say the thing I've noticed about JL Skinner, he's playing more confident. He's playing loose, and it doesn't look like he's thinking as much, right? Which is a great thing. Like we always say, like if you're thinking too much on the football field, you're not going to look good. You're not going to produce. He's just got, I think, more confidence and security inside the system. He's been waiting for his opportunity. He's making the most of it. I liked what I saw from him. And certainly, Sean Payton mentioned the safety position after Thursday's practice, really talking about like for Caden Stearns, who is doing conditioning, he's making good progress. But Sean had said there, he's got a road ahead of him. And look, I think a lot of people can misinterpret that or look into it in a multitude of ways. I think the first goal here for Caden, like he's going through the conditioning side right now to be able to get back on the football field. But the reality is he hasn't done any football related stuff, no football position related drills in over a year. So that's the hurdle he's going to have to clear next, is when he's done with the conditioning phase and he puts his helmet on, he's going to go through, individual period and things like that. Expect him to be limited for quite some time in terms of the injury report, because you want to build up. You want to be smart with him. But it has opened up opportunities. Obviously, PJ Locke, Brandon Jones running with the mantle right now. But then you mentioned guys like JL Skinner, Devin Key. Those guys are firmly in the mix for a roster spot here as well. And good opportunities, and I'd say they're making the most of them. So that's just something I think, if we're going to close out today's show, just some good observations early on. And I would say the best part about this, no injuries that have really kind of been notable, right? In terms of guys going down on the field. I know Nick Benito went to the side field after stretch. So, I think he's working on something there. Nick Gargiulo left practice, I think, on Wednesday. Didn't see him out there on Thursday, but we'll see if that changes here for Friday's practice. And look, Broncos Country, Sayre, myself, we will have you covered after Friday's practice, the first open one in Broncos Country. Make sure if you go to practice, you share your thoughts here on the show, as well as you maybe react to what you see at Broncos practice, as Sayre and I bring you deeper inside Broncos training camp here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. With that said, we will see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.